Welcome back to another episode of our show, friends. We are so excited that all of you are here today. We are talking specifically about becoming sales superstars. We are talking about strategies for client acquisition, meaning those people that are following you on your socials, on the internet, who are following you in real life. We are transitioning them into your clients, into people who are going to be working with your company for the long haul. And today we're talking with Bethany. We are so excited to have you here, Bethany. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Um, yes. So, I mean, I love that question because it's so open-ended, but sometimes I'm like, oh, so many things I could say.
I know.
And I love to share some personal things about myself because that's something I always want to do when I meet new people myself. I'm like, tell me who you are as a human being. And so for me, what my day to day is I actually have a busy household of 5 kids, which always kind of shocks people a little bit. Mostly teenagers, so they're relatively self-sufficient. I have a kitty cat named Raven. She may walk through my screen during our time today. And I love the outdoors. That's my go-to on the weekends is to go hiking and kayaking and learn native plants and learn a little about herbology on the side. So
I love that.
besides being, kind of the sales maven, those are the things I love to do on my off time.
I love that. And you are actually known as the follow-up boss. So can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah. So the irony, of course, is years ago, I've been selling literally since I was like this big. I sold Girl Scout cookies. I was one of the top sellers in my area. I sold, stuff for band and things to get me to camp and all kinds of things like that. And my mom once told me, and kind of stoked my ego back then that I could sell to just about anybody. And the reality is one, I was a cute little girl at the time, which helps. And
Mhm.
two, I was persistent. It was easy to knock on doors and find my audience at the time. I
Mhm.
grew up, became an adult, and got into some direct selling companies, selling a lot of products and doing different things, and realized that selling was actually kind of hard. Um,
Yes.
it wasn't, I didn't have a captive audience knocking on doors, and people willing to open the door, aka to a cute little kid. Now I'm an adult, and I had to overcome those. And there was a lot of sales techniques that I learned that I hated.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I actually convinced myself that I was terrible at selling.
Okay.
Uh, and
Gotta start somewhere.
right, right. And the thing that I love to make that point because I think so many of us think that we suck at selling. And so many people avoid the phrase selling or the concept of selling because they're like, I hate it. It's terrible. No one likes it.
Mhm.
Yes. And we'll get to the and here further along. So I kept moving along. I ended up in a job that I didn't particularly enjoy, wasn't getting the satisfaction out of. Went through some life changes, including going through a 3-month leadership program that helped me kind of refine myself and my confidence, and ended up in a sales job working for a local digital marketing company. And the thing that really stood out about that was it was my audience. I loved service-based B2B selling because other businesses were my jam. I'd been networking at that point for like 10 years and I was like, I could do this all day, every day and not get paid as long as my bills are paid. I'd
Yeah.
be happy. Um, and another
Mm.
I was still learning sales techniques that just didn't sit well for me.
Mhm.
And the thing that really stood out to me was I was selling services to help brick and mortar businesses get their customers to find them and show up in their, walk in their door. Obviously a need. I would walk into businesses who were clearly not getting enough business and say, I can help you with that. And they would say, I'm not interested. There's the door.
Mm.
And so there was a disconnect.
Right.
And when I asked my leadership, how do I overcome this disconnect? Their answer wasn't the most helpful.
Mm.
And it was catchphrases like, well, you need to build know, like, and trust, and you need to have 8 to 12 touches to have a sale. And I'm like, but what does that mean?
Yeah. That's a very good question, and so few people have the answer to that one.
Yeah. But I wanted to find the answer. And
Okay.
so I dug into it, and my time with that company allowed me to just kind of uncover it. And the secret seems so obvious yet so hidden, and it lies kind of in human psychology of we love to discover, but we don't like being told.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
mentioned I have a house full of teenagers, and I have to, I come face to face with this on a daily basis.
Every day.
Um, and so a big part of that was just, how do I build the relationship first, and get them to the point where they're willing to trust me enough to have a sales conversation.
Yeah.
My time with that company came to an end, and I had a big decision to make, and I decided to launch my own business, and that is where the beginning of the Follow Up Boss journey began.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love that you had to go on that journey from going from those high pressure tactics into a more personalized approach because, as you said, people love to discover things. People don't like to be told things. So, how do we go about creating an authentic, personalized approach to creating those relationships with people instead of those high pressure tactics that we are typically taught in the sales space?
Yes, yes. So one of the big things to remember is it's always about the human. And again, and I think this whole conversation, Kim, you and I are going to realize, you're probably going to realize a lot of the stuff seems so obvious, but we have been trained to think otherwise.
Mhm.
So it's really about the relationship. It's about understanding the person that you're talking to. And here's some of the things that I help people understand is, when you're having a conversation with a potential prospect, you can't force the conversation. You can't make them come to a point that you want them to have that light bulb moment. All you can do is guide them. You are their guide. And that's what the conversation is. And a lot of the sales techniques that don't feel authentic are because we've been taught to force and manipulate the conversation, and
Yes.
kind of like corner somebody,
Yeah.
and they don't like that. But when you guide somebody, um, through understanding, like, what are your skill sets? What are your strengths? And what is their personality? So you can kind of customize the conversation, just like you would if you sat down with a friend and had a conversation. They're having a bad day. And you're
Yeah.
not going to be like, well, you just need to get over yourself and you need to do XYZ. That doesn't make a good conversation.
Right.
So we use those same skills in selling, and that's when it feels natural and organic, which is what ultimately everyone is trying to accomplish.
That is so incredibly true because if we fall back into those tendencies of, the things that we're supposed to say and forcing that conversation, it's really not going to work to our benefit the same way it wouldn't if we were talking to a friend. And so I love the idea of conceptualizing anything that we're doing as a conversation with somebody that we know, that we're sitting down with in the same room and having a discussion about something going on that we can both connect over and making sure that we're having that conversation with them and not at them. So
Yes.
let's dial into that a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about how businesses can find their unique rhythm and stay genuine while being effective in their sales strategies. So, how do we maintain that authenticity instead of scripting things?
Yes. Yes. So there's two sides of this coin. The first side of it is yourself. Understand yourself. And that's where I mentioned skills and strengths before. So one of the things that I recognize for myself is that I have a natural way of gaining people's trust. And a little bit, I think, is because I'm quirky and just naturally myself. Like, I can't really make myself fit into a box.
Mhm.
And again, a lot of traditional sales techniques tell you to act and be a certain way. And the moment you start trying to pretend to be something you're not, all the red flags go off.
Yeah.
And that's if you feel yourself in a conversation, stepping into kind of a facade, kind of an avatar or something not yourself, they're going to sense it. You're going to sense it. It's not going to feel right. And the way to step into your authenticity is first to discover, what are my strengths? Am I a very direct personality and really good at just like identifying things and getting straight to the point? Lean into that. And there's ways to do that. And obviously any of these strengths can be pushed the wrong way.
Mhm.
And I know directness sometimes happens that way, but you'll find an audience that wants it and desires it. Then there's kind of, I guess, sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum, someone like myself, who I'm really good at just asking really good questions and being curious and vulnerable, which allows the other person to speak and talk and share. Anytime I have a first meeting with somebody, I just ask lots of questions. I let them share with me what they're comfortable with, and I'll learn everything I need to know about how I can help them and what's possible. And I don't need to push it into that conversation. And I can usually also come to recognize that the flip side of that coin is, what is their personality? Some personalities, they're ready to act. They're ready to move. They're like, tell me what you can do. Tell me how this can happen. And you can tell if someone's more of that personality type through the speed of their talk. I'm a fast talker, so I tend to act faster. Someone who's very slow and deliberate and calm, you cannot push one of that personality. So
Yeah.
if your prospects tend to be like a slow, calm, deliberate, then you also get to kind of adjust and be slow and calm and deliberate and understand, what do they need from me in this moment?
And I think that's so incredibly valuable because making sure we understand who we're talking to can really change the game. If we are fast paced, you and I are both very fast paced people. We like to talk fast, we like to act fast. But if we're around people who are on that slower side, bringing it down to their level allows you to connect. If we stayed at that higher level where we were moving quickly, they wouldn't stay in that conversation for very long. And so
Mm.
we've got some really great people in our comment section right now. Lala wants to know, what do you think about sales playbooks?
Mm. So generally, when I think of a playbook, and Lala, you can correct me if you mean something different, I think of like scripts. Uh, and the advantage of scripts is it can help you understand talking points. And everyone's a little bit different when it comes to this. I don't love scripting. But I'll also say this. So I also operate in the world of public speaking, and I talk with a lot of other public speakers. And recently, doing a mastermind of speakers, we were talking about: do you practice and script out your talk, or do you outline it and just kind of wing it from there? And the answers to that question are all over the board, and it depends a lot on your personality. Probably depending on your own personality. If you're like Kim and I, fast thinking, fast talking, scripting is not going to serve you. What you want are talking points. What is my purpose in this conversation? And you don't want to push forward too fast.
Mhm.
If you're more slow and deliberate, having things a little more scripted might support you, because it'll help you feel confident that know what you're saying and when you're saying it. But always making sure that it's your words, it's your content, and it's adjusted to that conversation. You can't walk into a conversation with an agenda, but you can have purpose.
Oh, I love that. That's a great takeaway. Don't walk in with an agenda, but walk in with purpose. Oh, I
Mhm.
love it. Write that down in the comments, friends. And if you've got questions for Bethany, we are taking your questions. We're going to be monitoring them as they come in. We still have a little bit to discuss, which I'm really excited for because we're about to get into some of those common mistakes that we see in sales a lot. But we want to hear from you too. Where are you struggling in your business right now? What could you use a little help with? Or what are some things that you're hearing that say, oh, I learned that lesson? I know that one. Tell us about your experience in the comments below. We want to hear from you as we continue to jump into our conversation about some of these big mistakes that we are seeing during sales conversations. So, when entrepreneurs, Bethany, are hitting those walls, what are some of those mistakes that they're making that leave them there, and what can kind of guide them away from that back into success?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that I see when people hit kind of a wall of resistance, it almost always is happening because you've moved forward too fast.
Mm,
You haven't followed the clues, and you haven't offered kind of the cookie crumbs to get there. I talk a lot about the customer journey, and I know in marketing and sales, we speak to the customer journey. And it's another one of those drop phrases that we use, that has meaning, but isn't always explained well. And
mhm.
so understanding everyone is going on a journey. I mentioned earlier that we are the guide. When you first meet somebody, they don't know you from Adam. So imagine that you are taking somebody up Mount Everest, and you are their guide, and you've shown up at base camp at the bottom of the mountain. And are you going to tell them, okay, so we're going to get up there? Like, I mean, you don't just take off immediately. Like, you walk up, they show up, and you're like, let's go. No one, they're like, who is this person? Is this our guy? I don't even know their name. What's happening? Do they know that, I have a sore foot? Like, whatever it is, you can make all the metaphors you want. You have to stop, they have to introduce themselves, explain their expertise, explain why they know what they're doing. How many times have they been up this? How do they overcome challenges? All the things.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happens in any of our customer journeys. The people have to know we're the right person for them. And a lot of times it's not actually from us talking at them. I mentioned before, I ask lots of good questions. I call that very initial phrase curiosity. And that's what needs to happen in that very first introduction conversation, is you being curious about them and encouraging them to become curious about you. And that will help the conversation and the process, the journey, move forward smoothly. If you jump into a pitch, if you jump into, this is what I can do for you and this is how I can help you, they don't know you. Again, trying to take people up Mount Everest without any kind of introductions. That's the biggest resistance I see, is that people have jumped stages before the prospect, the person, their audience is ready for that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really like the Mount Everest example. That's a good one to think of if you are jumping into these conversations, listeners, and you're trying to figure out where to go or what to do. Asking those questions, being curious, making sure that you are getting information back from them is so incredibly valuable. One of the best things that I learned at the beginning of my career was to stop talking and
Mm-hmm.
to listen. If I do not talk, that kind of creates that awkward pause, and people are then able to say more things to me, and I'm able to learn things. I know what's important to them, I know what matters to them, and then I know how to respond to them. So the more I can be quiet in my business when I'm in a conversation with somebody, the more information I'm then able to get to make better decisions on how I am responding to people, having conversations, and yes, making those sales. And Anthony's in our comments, and he says, I actually hate sales. I just feel the ick doing it, but I need to. So, how do you overcome that? So, let's talk a little bit about some of those creative methods that you can use to make sure that it's not feeling sleazy when you are having those conversations with people, Bethany.
Absolutely. So I mentioned stages earlier, and this can make a big difference in knowing how to not feel icky about the sales. So I mentioned curiosity being that first stage. And curiosity could be when people are first reaching out to you on social media, or maybe you're even doing outreach. Cold outreach is one of the hardest things to do. And some businesses have to do it. I have a number of clients that require doing cold outreach. And so we find very creative ways to initiate the conversation. And that's what you're doing. That's the whole purpose of that stage, is to initiate conversation. You're not trying to win the sale immediately. And that's what people are used to. They're used to people talking at them and for lack of a better word vomiting on them. And that's why they avoid salespeople. So first stage is curiosity. Once you've gotten someone into that initial conversation, really understanding what do they need, letting them talk, letting them tell you what they need and want from you will help guide that conversation and move you forward to be like, would you like to know more about how I can serve you, how I can solve that problem? Asking that kind of permission question.
Yeah.
In sales, so often we're told not to ask permission. And I actually hold that the greatest way to show respect to your prospects is to ask for consent to move the conversation forward. And then suddenly we're like, when we ask someone, may I tell you more about what I do? And they go, yes. Like, you're not going to just tell me? Yes, please. And that feels so good to us. And if there's a hesitation, there's a resistance, and maybe I didn't give enough. I didn't ask enough. We haven't gotten there yet. They're not really ready to take my engagement ring.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's so valuable too when you enable people to be in charge of their own time by asking, can I tell you more? Do you want to know more about this? Instead of just taking their time from them, that shows that you are willing to listen to their levels of consent, and you're not just there to take their money or to take their time. When you ask to be responsible with their time, you're also going to be responsible with their money and with their efforts and with the things that they're investing into you. So I love the idea of asking consent and making sure we know that that person really does want to talk to us and we haven't misread any signals.
Yes, absolutely.
So, on that note, I want to talk a little bit about your tips for coaches because a lot of us are coaches. We help other businesses, we help other entrepreneurs. So, what are some of your tips for people who are both content creators and coaches to be able to market themselves online without constantly being one giant sales pitch for ourselves?
Yes. Well, one thing I would like to clarify for the way when I talk about the difference between marketing and sales, I define those two things. Marketing is a messaging to a general audience. So when
Mhm.
you're posting content on social media, that is marketing. When you're
Yeah.
doing email newsletters, that's marketing. Sales are one-to-one conversations.
Mhm.
And the reason I distinguish the difference is because the language will vary a little bit. Now, some businesses, coaches and other businesses can do almost entirely marketing in order to get and convert clients.
Mhm.
And if you are one of those businesses who do not seem to have that same conversion rate, a lot of times it's because there's something about what you offer that requires more of that. You need to draw them into that sales conversation. It's either not as clear what you're going to do for them, and that's not even necessarily messaging. It may be
Mhm.
messaging, but sometimes it's just, yes, I know I need this. Take my money. And sometimes it's, is this the right fit for me? How do I know? I need to have a conversation with a human.
Yeah.
Um, and so one thing I see happening a lot in the online spaces is so many businesses relying so heavily on their content to do all of the heavy lifting. And they don't, and also they want people to go from, I've been watching you and I've been seeing a little of your content and now you want me to do a discovery call with you, but I'm a little scared because I don't know what that means and I haven't learned enough. So customer journey, I talk,
Mhm.
I can't drill on that enough. Really understanding what is the mindset of your prospects. So if you have a large following, a large audience, but you don't see a lot of people converting to clients, there's some kind of barrier
Mhm.
between watching your content and coming to you. And maybe it's you're not answering all the questions. What is it they need to know and decide before they come to you? Maybe they need to come to you to ask and get to know that you're the right fit, especially if it's going to be working directly with you, like one-to-one coaching.
Yeah.
Expect to have one-to-one conversations before they say yes.
Yep.
Um, so there's a lot of the work that I do. Here's my kitty cat. Um, a lot of the work that I do, I help kind of figure out that custom journey, that custom
Mhm.
process,
Right.
because there's a framework, but it's not a cookie cutter framework for every business.
And I think that's so valuable too, because especially in sales where we are told this, that we have to say and we have to do, we feel like it is very cookie cutter. And the
Mhm,
more we have conversations, realizing that it's going to be a unique experience for each business, for each entrepreneur, and for each potential client, the more we have the freedom to figure out who those people are and how to engage with them and how to interact with them and how to actually convert them from follower to client. So, what is one of your best, most important tips for actually doing that conversion from follower over to client?
mhm. Well, one of the things it's really important to remember is that, especially for online content, um, you have content that is intended to draw people into your audience, that curiosity creator
Mhm.
that'll make them like stop the scroll and be like, ooh, this person's got something worth watching. But then you also have content that nurtures them into feeling like they know who you are and
Mhm.
are willing to take that next step to either talk with you or buy from you. Um, and knowing how to fit that content is important.
Mhm.
Um, for my business, I have a fair amount of followers online, and a lot of those actually came from in person contacts. So my content is very focused on that nurturing piece because I'll meet somebody at an event And I know that that one conversation wasn't enough to convert them. I need them to really go deeper with me. So online content and offline conversations.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And networking is really valuable for building up that followership and for starting those communications and those communities and all of the things that you're doing to build up that potential audience to convert into a client. And because we know networking can be incredibly overwhelming at times, do you have tips for us to make sure that we are able to be consistent with that and put our effort into it without it draining everything that we have?
Absolutely. One thing is to recognize what your own social battery can handle. And I always tell people it is better to find one or two good groups that you can commit to and attend regularly, versus lots of groups that you're going to pop into once in a while. It's the one and done kind of thing is where we get burnt out because we think we can show up and pass out a bunch of business cards and people will become our customers. It takes more than one conversation almost any time.
Yeah.
I go back to that phrase I was told back when I was working in digital marketing, 8 to 12 touches. What
Yeah.
that means is interactions. And statistics say that salespeople, and this is professional salespeople, not even business owners, professional salespeople, like 80% stop having those interactions after like 3. And most of the conversions happen beyond that. So when networking, I tell people, don't worry about your business card so much. Go in, find, depending on your social battery, 1 to 3 people in that meeting that you're like, this person resonates with me.
Mhm.
We had a good conversation. I like them, whether they're a potential prospect like client for me, or maybe they work with my client and there's potential for referrals. That's huge. We overlook those so often.
Yeah.
Identify those 1 to 3 people, get their information, reach out to go deeper. And deeper is always better than wider.
Oh, yes, that was one that we put in the comments section too. That's the takeaway right there. Lala's in the comments and she's saying, when I join Facebook groups, 50% of them are just selling to me. And we've had people echoing those sentiments inside of the chat as well. I see that all of the time too. So, Bethany, when we want to go and be active members of these groups, but not be that person who's constantly selling, what is a really good way for us to be a part of the conversation without being a part of the problem?
Mm-hmm. Facebook groups are challenging because a lot of times we go into them thinking that it can just be a big bulletin board for us. And that's what everyone else is doing. So it's kind of like if it were a physical space, it would be people running in, shouting, "This is what I do," and throwing a flyer on the wall and then running back out the door and not looking at anything else anybody else had posted. What will set you apart, and it's similar to my networking tip, is to go into these groups, interact with people, have natural conversations, identify a handful of people that you're like, these people seem cool, and let's take this a little farther, and then ask them permission. Can we have a deeper conversation? Because we're all in this group together, but how can we do something mutually beneficial that's not going to just happen here in this group?
That makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask as we're wrapping this up, you've given us a lot of really great, valuable information today. There's a lot that we can take away. We're making sure that we're getting that consent. We are making sure that we're having conversations with and not just at. We're making sure that we're being a valuable part of a membership, of a community, of a group of people who are doing things to build up those connections with people. So, what are your 3 top tips for our people who are watching today while we are live and on our replay to take away and maybe take those action steps to implement this into their strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the top tip is to know your customer's journey, like really understand it. And this is where, and I know for a lot of businesses that the phrase niching down can be very scary. If you're a solopreneur in particular, niching is the most important way for you to get clear on who you're talking to and how they need to hear you and what their journey looks like. And having that niche and having that specific language will help them hear you and feel heard. And surprisingly, others will also identify themselves in it. So a lot of times when we niche down, it actually broadens our audience, not narrows it. So that's the first one, is know your customer's journey. The second one is know the purpose of all the resources you have within the context of that journey. So website, social media, business card, if you have podcasts, newsletters, each one of those resources is a touch point, is a part of that journey, and it plays an important piece. And so often we just make those resources and not understand when our prospect is using that resource or going to that resource. And thirdly is, how can you be very intentional about creating human to human interactions within that journey? That's where it'll get away from the icky, slimy sales when you're human to human. And I'll give a real quick example of this. I recently pulled into a local fast food place here in town, and they had recently switched their order taker on the screen to an AI, which a lot of us, we have a love-hate relationship with these technology. And I have a particular love-hate relationship with AI and automation. I love it for its efficiency. I love how much it's a time saver. I also know that there comes a point when I need to talk to a human being because I don't want pickles on my burger.
Yes.
And so where in your customer's journey are they needing to talk to the human to make sure this is the right fit for them and make sure that you are easily accessible at those moments?
Oh, I love that. That is such a good takeaway. I feel like we need to do a whole episode on identifying when in our process we are making sure that they have those human connections, the human conversations, and the human touches, even if we're using all of the other resources in what we are creating. So we are going to take note of that. We're going to write that one down because that's a good episode. And of course, if you are resonating with today's conversation, we are going to be monitoring your questions and comments, especially if you are here on the replay. And if you want to reach out to Bethany to learn more, to understand more about what she does, how she can help you, and what you can learn from just hanging out in her presence, you can reach out to her online. Bethany, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at thefollowupboss.com. And from there, you can also find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube as well.
And I am so excited to learn more, to hear more, and just to be in your presence because your energy is so fun. You bring such great knowledge and such great information. If you are watching today and you've loved the episode, go ahead and leave us a like. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was and follow along because Be Live is bringing even more guests like Bethany here on stage to help answer your questions and to teach you things that you might not know about or might need a little more help with to grow your businesses. We've got lots of tutorials, lots of fun episodes, and lots of great people here on screen. So let us know who you want to see more of, and we'll see you in our upcoming episodes. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.